If you recognise this poster, then you are in the right place to listen to a talk about it. So my name is Jodee Simpson. I'm an autistic speech and language therapist. I'm also the co-founder of the Neurodivergent SLT network, which has 430 members. And I'm also doing a postgraduate research study exploring the professional identity of neurodivergent SLTs. And I'm at Leeds Beckett University. So what's my starting point then? Why did I start this study? Well, in the peer support group, we found that a lot of people had been telling us that they didn't feel like they belonged in the speech and language therapy profession, and that they were so burnt out that they were ready to leave the profession altogether. Now, I was really concerned about this just by the sheer number of people who were telling us this. And that's why I went to the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists and have been campaigning on behalf of my peers. Now, we did a poll and 88% of people said that they had left the job or were considering their current job because their needs just simply weren't being met, and they were really struggling to feel like they belong. Now, this doesn't feel right, and that's my motivation for doing this study. Well, you might be wondering why my study is about neurodivergent speech and language therapists, and yet the title of this poster is about a diverse workforce. Now, I am going to explain more as I go along, but I realized very early in this study that it wasn't just neurodivergent SLTs that were saying that they feel like they don't belong. It was people of colour, it's people from the LGBTQ community. And I'm really concerned about this. But let's ask ourselves this. Are we curious about exploring new ways of being, doing, and becoming an SLT? Or have we defined the boundaries of knowing to be a fixed ideal SLT? Now, if you are thinking that perhaps we can learn something from our diverse workforce, or maybe you are thinking, well, they're no different from us, they must just be struggling, then I'm going to question whether you are curious. But if you are curious, keep listening. Now, my initial research plan was to explore why neurodivergent SLTs felt like they didn't belong in the profession. And I thought that if I defined our professional identity self-concepts, that I might discover why so many of us feel like we don't belong. But I very quickly realized that I actually have an ethical dilemma, because by the very act of defining identity, I'm reinforcing the very othering that I'm actually trying to dismantle and disrupt. So what do I do? If I reflect a representation of the NDSLT's lived experience by defining and reducing our experiences to common themes, what am I going to find? I think we all know that we're going to deviate from the norm. But at best, we'll be highly intuitive, which we obviously are, but at worst, we'll be judged as incompetent. But this is already our reality. So what next? Now, I came across a methodology and a research paradigm called agental realism and diffractive methodologies by a quantum physicist called Karen Bairad, who has applied some of the principles of quantum physics into the social sciences. Now imagine a white light. We're going back to our science lessons in year 9. Okay. Imagine a white light. You shine it through a prism and it diffracts into that beautiful phenomenon that we call the rainbow. Now, Berad invites us to see the NDSLT as a phenomenon that is co-created through the entanglements of both human and non-human factors, like the way that neurodivergence is labelled as a disorder, that our communication is seen as flawed and our sensory needs are silenced because they're not even part of the SLT toolkit. But diffractive methodologies questions who gets to define meaning? Who gets to define what it means to be an SLT? Whose communication is privileged or silenced by the tools of our profession? Now, one of my co-investigators said, "It's my job to be the shiniest thing in the room." Now, you might be saying, well, that's nothing new. We already do shiny. I mean, look at the pop-up pirate. It's been the icon of the all singing, all dancing SLT since the 1970s. We're already doing this. But diffractive methodologies will take this a step further and say, well, actually, I want to question the very nature of shiny to the autistic child. Because for me, as an autistic adult who was an autistic child, it's the things that calm my nervous system. It's feeling safe to connect emotionally with another human being. It's the little tiny details in nature. That's my shiny, not the pop-up pirate. Too much energy. But my cookie cutter training taught me that the building blocks of communication are measured by the observable behaviours of red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. That's obviously a metaphor for what I call the metaphorical 7 ways of SLT knowing. And these have been handed down to us by the early pioneers of speech and language therapy, who were mainly white, female gendered, cisgendered, straight, upper middle class women, and they all had RP accents or they had to acquire one. But the NDSLT's experience isn't represented in the vocabulary available to us in this framework. We've got red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. But when we add neurodivergence, what are the differences in the diffraction pattern? Do we see all 7 colours or do we see more? Are some missing? Or are there things there that are silenced because they are not observable? Perhaps they are tangible, embodied with human and non-human ways of knowing. Perhaps they are sensory. Perhaps they are objects that feel like they're an extension of who we are. Perhaps part of our communication is a need to have a visceral, felt sense of safety and connection. Perhaps we actually have a different way of knowing, but so far it's been labelled as intuition. But intuition, what is our intuition? It's sensory, it's embodied, it's visceral, it's a different way of knowing, it's a different way of being, but it's silenced because it's some of these things that we are told are not part of our scope of practice. So becoming a champion for change is important if we want to be a profession that doesn't stay static, that keeps moving forward, that challenges the boundaries of what it means to be an SLT, especially within a diverse workforce. Now, I've invited two of my favourite champions for change, Razwana Shah, who is championing change in advanced practitioner work, challenging the scope of our practice and challenging what we do and streamlining and making what we do even better. Fatima bint Hanif, one of my favourite people, championing change in the world of equity, diversity, belonging. She's now an author. She's absolutely amazing. Please read their stories in the poster and follow them on social media. They're amazing champions for change, and I'm their biggest champions. Now, my final thoughts, because I've only got 6-7 minutes. What if responsible research means making space to be inspired by the diverse or neurodivergent SLT's way of knowing? What if we reimagine the boundaries of what it means to be an SLT? What if we open up new possibilities of knowing, but inspired by diverse and neurodivergent SLTs? Instead of defining our knowledge as deviant, failure, or a curiosity, but then shutting it away with all the other things that don't quite fit neatly into our professional ideals. Now, are you ready for change? Are you ready to reimagine an SLT identity that is fit for a diverse workforce? If your answer is yes, then please be our champions. You can also follow the work of my study through the QR code here and the link. If you have any questions, please pop some questions or comments in the chat below. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks ever so much for listening. Goodbye.